Welcome back to CUFI's 2020 Virtual Summit. Already we've heard from several top U.S. and Israeli officials on important issues related to the U.S.-Israel relationship. Now we'll hear from several experts in the field and receive an update on the state of current issues in the Middle East. It is my privilege to introduce you to Rabbi Aryeh Lightstone. Aryeh Lightstone was appointed in April 2017 to serve as advisor to U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman. An ordained rabbi from Yeshiva University, Rabbi Lightstone has been fully engaged in all forms of communal work. Rabbi Lightstone founded the Aleph Bet Academy, the Jump Leadership Initiative, Jerusalem Ambassadors, and Friday Night Lights, which are all ongoing international successful programs. Rabbi Lightstone developed the first mainstream Jewish college credit program for unaffiliated high school students from across North America. Please welcome Rabbi Aryeh Lightstone.
Hi, good evening. Shari, thank you so much for that warm introduction. It is again an honor to be here with you at the summit. And while I'm not with you physically, I feel that I'm with you spiritually and in all other fashions. I congratulate you and your entire team on what I'm positive will be another successful summit, charging and recharging the energy that's required for your critical and holy mission. Last year, you gave me the honor of addressing your crowd twice. Once was at the dinner prior to the night to honor Israel, where I had the high honor of being the guest along with Ambassador and Mrs. Friedman at the table of Pastor and Mrs. Hagee. And to be amongst greats is something that one should never take for granted and one should never get used to. And that was truly a privilege and an honor. But the day before was a higher privilege and a greater honor, for you allowed me to speak to your college students who are not college students. They are driven activists. They are impassioned with your mission. And I had an opportunity to speak with them, and I believe it was a dialogue in between them and I had a discussion and a conversation. And when we finished, I was able to take the largest selfie that I've taken before, so I'm grateful for that. Thank you. But more importantly, there are moments in this job like there are in all jobs. And there are moments in our life like there are in all lives where you have a moment to get down, where you have a moment to pause, where you have a moment to reflect and you are not positive of the right way forward. And it was the energy that I felt in the room, not at the night to honor Israel, although there was plenty of energy there, but it was in the room with the college students where I felt that there was purpose and mission to that which I am doing, and I appreciate that because for the last 364 days, I've called back on those moments to find additional strength, and I am grateful for you and to your group for providing that. Thank you. This evening, I wanted to share with you perhaps an original thought in terms of what we are doing and how we can leverage our time together in this digital atmosphere to be more than what we are. For all we know that we need to strive for greater than where we are at this moment. And to do that, I want to understand the purpose of Christians United for Israel. I'm not going to speak about the Christian component. Last year I spoke in great depth of the Christian Judeo values that we share so deeply between our country, the United States of America, and Israel. And I'm not going to speak about Israel very much, but I'm going to speak about united. What happens when we are united, and what happens when we are divided? And in order to share that with you, I'd like to do it in the form of a story that I heard once 18 years ago, and it has stuck with me, and not a week goes by where I don't think of this story as a purpose and drive. You see, once upon a time, before Instagram and TikTok, Facebook and Twitter, people had to do different creative things in order to entertain themselves. Amongst them, they would try to enter into the Guinness Book of World Records. And there was a fellow who decided that he was a great tightrope walker. And he decided that it was going to be his job to be the first person in history to tightrope walk backwards across Niagara Falls. And he calls all of his friends and says, hey, if you're free this Monday, come up to Niagara Falls and you'll see something interesting. And 100 friends come to see what he's going to do. And he stands on the tightrope and he says, who wants to see the first person to ever tightrope walk across Niagara Falls? And people are like, I guess I will. Sounds interesting. Either way, it will be entertaining. And he says, who believes in the great Blondini? And they turn from one side to the other side, and he goes, I'm the great Blondini. He says, who believes in the great Blondini? And people say, okay, we believe in the great Blondini. And lo and behold, he's the first person ever to tightrope walk across Niagara Falls. And he comes back and he says, if you thought that was cool, look forward to next week and bring a friend. And the following Monday, he comes back, and there are about 1,000 people sitting there. And he says, who wants to see the first person tightrope walk backwards across Niagara Falls? And people are like, sure, sounds good. It says, who believes in the great Blondini? And people go, we believe in the great Blondini. And he tightrope walks backwards across the Niagara Falls. And he says, if you thought that was cool, come back next week and bring a friend. And he gets up on the rope the following week, and now there are 1,500 people there. And he says, who wants to see the first person tightrope walk backwards blindfolded over Niagara Falls? And at this point in time, people know the deal. And he says, who believes in the great Blondini? And you hear an echo across the Niagara Falls, we believe in the great Blondini. And backwards, blindfolded, he tightrope walks across Niagara Falls. He says, if you think that's cool, come back next week and bring a friend. The following Monday, he's there, and there are 2,000, maybe 3,000 people there, and it's him in blindfold backwards with a wheelbarrow. And he says, who wants to see the first person to tightrope walk backwards pushing a wheelbarrow while blindfolded? And they're like, we do. Says, who believes in the great Blondini? And they scream, we believe in the great Blondini. We believe in the great Blondini. And backwards, blindfolded, pushing a wheelbarrow, he becomes the first person to cross on a tightrope Niagara Falls. And he comes back and he says, if you thought that was cool, come next week and bring a friend. And at this point in time, it's the final Monday, and there are 10,000 people that are crowded to see what the great Blondini will do. And he stands up with a wheelbarrow and the blindfold, standing backwards on the tightrope, and he says, who wants to see the first person tightrope walk backwards blindfolded, pushing a wheelbarrow with someone in it? And people scream, we do. And he says, well, who believes in the great Blondini? And they scream out, we believe in the great Blondini. And he says, who believes in the great Blondini? And screams out, we believe in the great Blondini. Says, do I have any volunteers? And silence breaks out throughout the Niagara Falls area. And after many minutes, an old fellow raises his hand and says, I volunteer. He climbs up, gets into the wheelbarrow, and the great Blondini, blindfolded, backwards, falls off the rope in the middle of Niagara Falls. Of course, that's not what happens. He succeeds in crossing Niagara Falls, blindfolded backwards, pushing this old gentleman in the wheelbarrow. And after accomplishing this tremendous feat, the piece de resistance of his entire 6-week ordeal, the press does not mob him, but they mob the volunteer, the old man. And they turn to him and says, what caused you to get into the wheelbarrow? He says, I was here on the first week. I've been a friend of the great Blondini's, and I was here. And he asked, who believes in the great Blondini? And I said, I believe in the great Blondini. In the second week, I said, I believe in the great Blondini. In the third week, etc., etc. And then when it was time to put our beliefs into action, it was very clear that talk is cheap. And my talk is not cheap. And I believe in the great Blondini, so I volunteered. So what does this story have to do for you and for me and the U.S.-Israel relationship? When Christians are united for Israel, when you are united, it is unbelievable what you can accomplish. Having a unity of mission and a unity of purpose is unbelievable, especially when it is directed towards something for Israel. Now, what does it mean to be united for Israel? That means that you are a tireless, thankless advocate for the U.S.-Israel relationship. Remember two things, please. Number one, the United States of America is the single greatest experiment by mankind in the history of the world. It is the greatest force for good in the history of the world. You might not believe that as you read the news and see social media. You might think that it is something other than that which it is. Is the United States perfect? Of course not. Should we strive to be more perfect? Of course we should. With all of that, are we not the greatest country in the history of the world? Darn right we are. And so what is our purpose of representing the United States of America? To make sure that the United States of America does what's right, represents what's right, and stands for what is right. And there's nothing more right than standing with the great state of Israel. It is a bastion of humanity, of civility, of democracy, of values in a region that is so sorely missing all of those things. Let's not be complicated about what it means to be united for Israel. United for Israel means knowing where we stand, and the United States of America, with pride, with dignity and purpose. And once we are standing, what do we stand for? We stand for the great state of Israel. We stand to make the United States stronger. We stand to make Israel stronger. And when we're able to accomplish both of those, we improve the United States of America, we better the state of Israel, and collectively we better humanity. And therefore, we have been at these conferences. We have been at these summits. We have sung the songs. We've danced the dance. We've pledged the pledges. But are we willing to do the work? The time is difficult right now. The challenges are great, and the opportunities are enormous. Since we first got here 3.5 years ago, the President Trump has historically recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, moved the embassy of the United States of America to Jerusalem, has recognized the Golan Heights, and has declared that Jewish people have the right to settle in their ancient historic homeland in Judea and Samaria. And then he put out the Trump Vision for Peace. Through all of this, with my boss, Ambassador Friedman, Senior Advisor Jared Kushner, the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Special Envoy Avi Berkowitz, it has been my privilege to work with people who carry humility, purpose, and drive in everything that they do. But let us not be complacent. During this time, where all of our plans since the launch of the Trump plan in January have been upended and pivoted because of COVID-19, one might think that standing with Israel is not a top priority. Not for America, perhaps not for the administration, and perhaps not for you individually. So this is the message that I have for you today. The United States of America is an unbelievable country, made so because of people like you and groups like yours. The United States of America has a tremendous mission and tremendous purpose, made so because of people like you and groups like yours. Now is the time to double down on your efforts to demonstrate what it means to be united for a purpose. And it's my honor and privilege and pleasure to go to work each and every day representing the United States of America to our top ally, certainly in the region, perhaps in the world, the great state of Israel. And I'm able to do it not just myself and the ambassador and our team at the embassy, but representing millions upon millions upon millions of Americans, represented by you and your great organization, knowing that it is our purpose and mission to strengthen the United States and to strengthen Israel together. Thank you for your support in this holy and critical mission. And I ask of you, do not walk away from this conference inspired without action. Take the inspiration and turn it into action. Commit now to come and visit us in Israel. Commit now to come and spend some of your charitable money here in Israel. Commit now to bring a friend who does not see the U.S.-Israel relationship the same way you do to the next conference, to the next summit, to the next meeting, to the next conversation. Commit now to call your members of Congress and your U.S. senators and explain that while America is going through challenges, the U.S.-Israel relationship is something that makes all of us stronger, and we must double our efforts on that. Thank you so much for allowing me to spend a little bit of your conference and summit with you. God bless you and all of your hard work, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Aryeh, for your insightful and inspirational remarks. It is my pleasure to introduce Bonnie Glick, the Deputy Administrator for the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. She previously served as a Foreign Service Officer with the State Department, serving tours of duty in Africa, Central America, and at the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, Bonnie Glick.
Thank you for welcoming me, Shari, and warm thanks to Pastor Hagee for your leadership and guidance. Thanks to presidents, world leaders, and communities of conscience around the globe. As an American Jew and as a representative of the Trump administration, your friendship, advocacy, and support mean a great deal. Today, I'd like to focus with you, our friends from CUFI, on a few big issues and developments that should matter to all friends of Israel. I represent the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is charged with carrying out America's foreign assistance efforts to advance national security and our country's global goals for developing countries around the world. I like to say that every nation's assistance programs are a reflection of that nation's core principles. For decades, America has set the standard for selfless world leadership. We helped rebuild Europe after 2 world wars. We buttressed fragile democracies against the threats of communism and tyranny. We're the global leader in providing vaccines, treatments, and prevention for diseases like tuberculosis, malaria, HIV/AIDS, Ebola, and now for COVID-19. All of this is a reflection of the generosity of the American people. Ours is a kind nation that exemplifies the language in Micah 6:8. Our job is to do justly, show mercy, and walk humbly with God. For me, this is the best guidance for how we approach our assistance to countries around the world. Our assistance programs help nations achieve greater self-reliance, prosperity, and freedom. Through the lens of our assistance, we speak with countries around the world as being on journeys to self-reliance. This is a dignified approach to U.S. government assistance. According to Maimonides' 8 levels of tzedakah, of charitable giving, the highest form of tzedakah is a loan, a grant, a partnership, or a job that results in the person no longer living by relying upon others. Another way of thinking about this is the idea of teaching a man to fish rather than giving the fish to him. There is perhaps no greater example of this than Israel, a nation of refugees who defeated foreign invasions and had to impose food rationing for its first decade of existence. But with their own hard work and American friendship and support, Israelis have built a thriving, free country. Today, Israel exports its innovations across the globe and cooperates with America to address some of our world's most urgent problems, including the widespread demand for reliable energy throughout sub-Saharan Africa. We're continuing to build on this important partnership. Together, America and Israel are helping the developing world flourish. Farmland is greener. Science is more advanced. Technology is more secure. And emerging markets are growing. Of course, no discussion about America's friendship with Israel is complete if we don't talk about our shared interests and common threats in the Middle East. Sadly, there remain dangerous elements and governments who are relentlessly committed to Israel's, and more often than not to America's, destruction. Forces of radical Islam align against us, and it is our destiny as 2 of the world's greatest and historic democracies to fight back. We're most effective when we do that together. President Trump has advanced the U.S.-Israel relationship in ways never seen before. This began with his decision to move the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. It continued with his recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, and went even further with his historic Peace to Prosperity plan. Another critical goal of President Trump and USAID is the protection of persecuted Christians around the world. The president is standing up for almost 250 million Christians around the world who are persecuted for their faith. Ancient Christian communities in the Middle East remain in grave peril from the zealots of ISIS and the radical mullahs in the Islamic Republic of Iran. These communities are the very cradle of the Christian faith, and their presence is a treasure that must be preserved. I know that the irony is not lost on this audience that Israel, the Jewish state, is the only truly safe place in the entire Middle East for Christians to practice their faith freely, openly, and with support from local citizens of all faiths. The Trump administration has provided hundreds of millions of dollars to revitalize these historic Christian communities. USAID is one of the best positioned agencies in the federal government to work on these efforts, and we are firmly committed to this work. Our hope is that these Christian communities in places like northern Iraq can be fully restored, and that they will continue to bear witness to the message of Scripture in the very place where it took shape. Indeed, President Trump's actions to champion the persecuted have been nothing short of extraordinary. Some might even call them miraculous. His commitment to the Jewish state is equally strong and deep-rooted. I have heard some call it equally miraculous. We, who are honored to serve our country in order to support historical communities and to highlight and counter discrimination, are honored to partner with friends like CUFI. Again, I want to thank you and CUFI for raising your collective voice. And now, I turn it back to you, Shari.
Thank you, Bonnie, for your service to our country and for underscoring the importance of foreign aid for the U.S. and Israel's security. Now I'm thrilled to introduce a good friend of CUFI's, Dr. Jonathan Schanzer. Jonathan is the Senior Vice President for Research at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, a leading foreign policy think tank. A sought-after public speaker, Jonathan has traveled widely throughout the Middle East and studied Middle Eastern history in 4 countries. He earned his PhD from King's College in London, where he wrote his dissertation on the U.S. Congress and its efforts to combat terrorism in the 20th century. Jonathan previously worked as a terrorism finance analyst at the U.S. Department of Treasury, where he played an integral role in the designation of numerous terrorist financiers. He testifies often before Congress and communicates widely in the American and international media. Please give your attention to Dr. Jonathan Schanzer.
Thank you, Shari. It's wonderful to be with you. I'm sorry I can't be with CUFI today in person, but thrilled to take part in this virtual conference for such an important organization. As you know, CUFI and FDD have worked very closely together over the years, and we look forward to doing so again once the COVID-19 crisis has passed. One area where I think we will find common ground, areas that we'll need to work on, connects to a project that Iran has launched over the last couple of years. This is what we're calling their PGM project, or Precision Guided Munitions Project. As all of you know, Iran has been providing rockets to its proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah and Shiite militias. They've been doing this for years. And one of the things that has been fortunate from Israel's perspective is that these rockets are unguided. This means that they try to point the rockets in the general direction of their targets and hope with their fingers crossed that they'll land on something worthwhile. But the reality is that most of these rockets fall short of their intended targets, sometimes on the Gaza population itself. Sometimes it overshoots the targets and for example, Hamas fires into the Negev desert and they miss all of the civilian or military targets that they had in mind. Now, Iran is aware of this. Iran is eager to try to rectify this from their perspective. And it's for that reason that they have started to provide precision-guided munitions to their proxies. They're doing it with their proxies, the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria, but probably most dangerously in Lebanon. Now, in some cases, they're able to provide the entire munition, or at least to train engineers to build these munitions. In other cases, they use the existing unguided rockets. They will cut off the top, drop in the necessary software and circuitry and wiring, which would include, by the way, a GPS system, and then solder it back up, put fins on the bottom of these rockets, and then connect them to a computer, which would be which would enable Iran or its proxies to guide the weapon toward a specific target. Now, this is of concern to Israel for a couple of reasons. One is that these rockets have the potential, it's not confirmed, but the potential to be able to evade Iron Dome and other missile defense systems, so that even if Israel fires an interceptor, they may not be able to destroy the ordnance midair. The other concern that we have is that they could try to overwhelm systems like Iron Dome. So, for example, if there are 20 interceptors in a given Iron Dome battery, and Hezbollah fires, let's say, 21 PGMs at a target, one will get through at minimum. This means, of course, that Hezbollah will be able to target things like the chemical plant in Haifa, or the nuclear facility in southern Israel in Dimona, or the Kiryat, which is the Pentagon of Israel. All of these things are of real concern to the Israelis, and the PGMs, just to be very clear, are able to land within 5 to 10 yards of their intended target. So this makes them very precise, and this is what Hezbollah in particular is building. The Israelis assess right now that Hezbollah is able to build roughly 1 or 2 a day. And this is obviously, when you start to think about the fact that we're 9 to 12 weeks into this crisis, depending on how you count it, they've been busy. And so there is a question, I think, at this point as to whether Israel will be able to take out these targets. We know that they have talked about this with their American counterparts. And so there could be a conflict coming. Just also worth noting that a lot of the explosions that you see taking place in places like Syria and Iraq, this is Israel removing PGM parts that are traveling by way of Iran to Lebanon. And so this is part of that, what the Israelis call the campaign between wars, or the war between wars. They're doing everything that they can to try to prevent this PGM project from reaching fruition. Now, there is some good news to this, which is that, number one, the Trump administration is very aware of the problem, and they're working to coordinate with the Israelis. I think the Israelis have asked for a green light to be able to operate in whatever way they see fit. And from everything that we're hearing, the Trump administration is eager to allow them to do this as long as it's done responsibly. The other thing, of course, is the ongoing maximum pressure campaign on Iran. If Iran is able to finance this project, it means that that certainly we don't need to be giving them sanctions relief, and this is not lost on the Trump administration. That, and the fact that the Israelis have one of the most advanced militaries in the region, I think is a sign that we will likely see this project neutralized. But this is something to watch. PGMs could be the thing that takes the Middle East to war this year, and we'll watch to see if we can prevent it. Over to you, Shari. Thanks so much for having me on your program today.
Thank you, Jonathan, for your key insights and invaluable perspectives. It is my privilege to introduce Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador Danon. Ambassador Danon is Israel's 17th permanent representative to the United Nations. With over 20 years of experience representing Israel overseas and within the public sector, Ambassador Danon has developed a reputation as one of Israel's most ardent defenders. Before assuming his role as UN ambassador, Danon served in the 18th, 19th, and 20th Knessets. Prior to serving in the Knesset, Danon was a member of the board of directors for the Jewish Agency for Israel and a member of the executive board of the World Zionist Organization, where he led efforts to combat anti-Semitism. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Danny Danon.
Shalom, everyone. Thank you, Shari, for that warm introduction and for all that you do for the state of Israel. And a big thank you for my dear friend, Pastor Hagee, and the entire Hagee family, true friends of Israel and the Jewish people. I wish that we could all be together in person today. The energy in the convention center every year is incredible. The coronavirus has presented us all with challenges, but nothing can stand in the way of the love that CUFI has for the state of Israel, for the land of Israel, for the people of Israel, and we are grateful for that. With God's help, this crisis will be over soon. Let me take this opportunity to send our thoughts and prayers to those who are been affected by the pandemic and wish those who are sick a refuah shlema, a speedy recovery. In times of crisis, people show their true colors. While we have witnessed extreme kindness and goodwill, some have resorted once again to their notorious behavior. The Iranian regime has asked for the sanctions that were put in place to stop their dangerous nuclear and regional activities to be lifted, claiming that it is necessary for them to care for their citizens. However, this is just another lie of the regime. There is no need to lift sanctions to provide the Iranian people with the medical and humanitarian assistance they need. Even President Rouhani admitted this fact. The sanctions that President Trump has put in place are crucial for the safety of the US, Israel, and the entire world. We will keep our eyes on the Iranian threat, and if need be, we will act against it forcefully. Unfortunately, the Iranian regime is not alone in showing its true colors in this crisis. While Israel has put aside our differences with the Palestinian Authority in order to fight the pandemic in our region, the Palestinian leadership has chosen to double down on hate and libel. We helped them with testing kits, protection kits, but their leadership, on the other hand, has spread disgusting lies and anti-Semitic libel against Israel and the brave women and men of the IDF. Shame on them. This is nothing new. During times of crisis and disease, anti-Semitism has always raised its ugly head. Jews have been used as scapegoats for the outbreak of diseases for centuries. The Palestinian anti-Semitism is a part of the larger wave of anti-Semitism we are experiencing all around the world. We declared war against anti-Semitism at the UN, and we have already won many battles. This year, the UN presented the first of its kind report on anti-Semitism to the General Assembly. The report was written with the support of the missions of Israel and the US, and it makes important recommendations on how to fight anti-Semitism. We are now working on getting all countries to adapt the report recommendations, including adapting a definition of anti-Semitism that defines denying the right of the Jewish people to a state in Israel as anti-Semitic. The Jewish people belong to the land of Israel, and the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people. This is as true as it was when God said to Abraham in the book of Bereshit, book of Genesis, chapter 13, verse 15, כי את כל הארץ אשר אתה רואה, לך אתננה ולזרעך עד עולם. For all the land which you see, I give to you and your descendants forever. Denying the right of the Jewish people to a state in Israel is anti-Semitic. Today, we are hearing voices that oppose Israel extending its sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. I read an article in the New York Times that called it annexation. Let's get one thing straight. You cannot annex something that belongs to you. And you definitely cannot annex what God has said belongs to you. Israel cannot annex Shiloh. We cannot annex Hebron. We cannot annex Bethel. They have always and will always be a part of Israel. Just as you have done in the past, you must stand with us today and support our right to extend sovereignty over the land of our forefathers. I am about to end 5 long years of fights and, more importantly, wins at the UN. Even when it looked to others like I was standing alone. I knew that I was not alone. I knew that I had the truth on my side, and I knew that I had all of you by my side. Our shared Judeo-Christian values are the basis of the unbreakable bond between us. And I thank you very much for all of your support and love. When I return to Israel, I will continue to serve the Jewish people, and I know you will be by my side there as well. I want to thank you all. Thank you for your love for Israel. Thank you for your prayers for Israel, and thank you for your support for Israel. We will stay together, and together we will prevail. Thank you very much, and God bless you all. Back to you, Shari.
Thank you, Ambassador Danon, for representing Israel so passionately and effectively at the UN. Now it is my pleasure to introduce friend of CUFI, Paul Teller. Paul is the Deputy Assistant to the President and the Director of Strategic Initiatives for the Vice President, where he continuously works to unite outside groups with officials at the highest level of our government. Paul previously served as the Chief of Staff for Senator Ted Cruz and as the Executive Director of the House of Representatives Republican Study Committee. He is a consistent friend to CUFI. It is my pleasure to introduce Paul Teller.
Hey guys, how are you, CUFI? I am privileged to be the Deputy Assistant to the President and Director of Strategic Initiatives for the Vice President. My name is Paul Teller, privileged to work every day at the White House. I've spoken with many of you before in person at previous CUFI events. Sorry I can't be with you. Obviously, nobody is together at this time in this CUFI summit. And we're sorry for that, but we look forward to next year all being together in person. Next year in Washington, D.C., maybe we should say. Privileged to, again, have the opportunity to be with you just for a few moments. First of all, please understand how important CUFI is to this White House, to this president, to this vice president, to this administration, and to me personally. Many of you know, again, we've spoken about this before, but I'm one of the Jewish men in the White House, and therefore my pro-Israel advocacy that I've done throughout the administration, most of the time in the legislative affairs shop. You might remember that. Some of you have met me before, and now again in the vice president's office, makes my Israel advocacy that much more personal, because it isn't just political, it isn't just geostrategic. It is something that to myself as a Jew is very personal, very important. Something I've grown up with, and have only grown to love my Israel advocacy work. And great to be with you today. In fact, I really want to say that working for this president and this vice president has made me even more proud of my Jewish heritage. It's easy to say those things openly, to be openly pro-Israel. I have many things on my office walls in the White House that are proudly pro-Israel, things that maybe couldn't have been hung there in previous administrations. So CUFI again is just so important, because not only does it stand for Israel, but as a Jewish man, to hear that there are Christians so passionately for Israel, so in such a principled way, just means a lot. It really does. Very grateful for that, and I always love connecting with you, because it allows me to go back to my Jewish brethren and say, it's not just Jewish folks that stand for Israel. It's Christian folks as well. And we're so glad to have your alliance, again, in religious terms, but certainly in political terms as well. I brought a few notes for myself here, because I really just didn't want to forget to leave out a few things. So you'll excuse me, I'm no expert at speaking in front of a camera this way. So if I look down for the next couple of minutes, it's just because I don't want to forget a couple of the points that I wanted to share with you. First, this is something anyone who's followed the Trump Pence administration knows. Israel is the U.S.'s most strategic partner in the Middle East and North Africa, without a doubt. I don't know if that's in question. We've made that clear every single day, in this administration. And it comes from more than 70 years of partnership. but it also comes from the passion and the principles of the men at the top, Donald J. Trump, Michael Richard Pence. The two of them lead the way and lead this entire administration, lead the White House in its pro-Israel advocacy. And without them, there wouldn't be as passionate and as successful of a pro-Israel campaign that we've had throughout these last few years. Look, obviously, our support for Israel derives from our shared values, but also our shared foreign policy in the region and across the world. And we're so grateful for that relationship. The president always refers to Israel as our cherished ally. You've heard him say that before. That's because of the connections on so many levels, right? Security and economic and cultural, political, et cetera, et cetera. Couple quick things to run down for you. These are things you probably know, but I can't help myself from saying them. I wrote myself little notes here. Just a few of the successes over the last few years under this administration. Of course, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. What a moment, right? Wasn't that fantastic? And then, as if that couldn't be topped, it was, right? When we moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And by the way, I should also mention, if you haven't gotten to know some of the staff over at the embassy, the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, these are fantastic people. Ambassador David Friedman, Aryeh Lightstone, David Milstein. These are just wonderful human beings, fantastic advocates for the United States and for the relationship with Israel. So get to know them if you haven't. Recognizing Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, again, another fantastic accomplishment. And then look, most recently, as articulated by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, concluding that the Israeli civilian settlements in Judea and Samaria are, it's not inconsistent with international law to have them merely exist, right? And that's just been a wonderful statement and just so excellent and inspiring for all of us in the pro-Israel community. And then we've got the President's Peace Plan, which is bold, it's unique, and it's realistic, and we are working on it every day to get that implemented. And please know that that's a priority of the president and this vice president. And look, when it comes to Iran, also an important aspect of pro-Israel policy is countering Iran. We're just going to continue with that maximum pressure campaign. There's no question. I was reassured that by the National Security Council right before making this video. And by the time you're watching this video, you will have just heard some new announcements in that maximum pressure campaign, some new sanctions, things like that I think you'll be very pleased with. But, all I ask is that you stay with us, keep supporting us in this White House. We've got more to come. And just know that we are with you so strongly, so fervently, so passionately, and we're so grateful. And again, and put my hand over my heart one more time to say thank you so much to CUFI and all that you do for Israel, for this White House, for this administration, and again, for me personally. So thanks again. Enjoy the rest of the summit, and we will be in good touch. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for taking time out of your busy schedule at the White House to address the CUFI Virtual Summit. Now we will hear from someone who used to work at the White House, Richard Goldberg. Richard is a senior advisor at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. From 2019 to 2020, Richard served as the Director for Countering Iranian Weapons of Mass Destruction for the White House National Security Council. Prior to that, he served as Chief of Staff for Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner. Throughout his government service, Goldberg has worked diligently in support of the U.S.-Israel relationship. He played a key role in U.S. funding for the Arrow 3 program, Iron Dome, and the deployment of an advanced missile defense radar to the Negev Desert. He drafted and negotiated passage of legislation sanctioning Iran and promoting human rights in the Islamic Republic, and spearheaded the first ever state legislation to divest public pension funds from companies engaged in boycotts of Israel. He is a fierce friend of Israel. Please give your attention to Richard Goldberg.
Hello, everyone at CUFI. Sorry I can't be with you in person, but I'm very glad to join you virtually as you gather together virtually in Washington in what is a very strange year, but still a very important year to America, to Israel, to our future and our national security. I want to give you some updates, very important updates from the Middle East, particularly about Iran. We've just heard in the last few weeks from the International Atomic Energy Agency, that is the UN's nuclear watchdog in Vienna, that Iran is currently concealing undeclared nuclear material and activities, and is also denying the IAEA inspections at least 2 undeclared nuclear sites inside of Iran. That is a very big deal. It constitutes a violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and Iran's fundamental nuclear obligations to the world, completely separate from the Iran nuclear deal commitments that the IAEA is telling us Iran is also violating even more now. The uranium enrichment is expanding in Iran. The production of heavy water is increasing. The testing of advanced centrifuges continues to go on. And so across the board, Iran is in full breach of its nuclear commitments and obligations. Now, I want to talk about the safeguards report. That has to do with the safeguarding of nuclear material and activities in Iran. Every country that is a member of the IAEA, including Iran, has what's called a Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement with the IAEA that governs the declaration and accounting of all nuclear material and activities and sites inside of a country. When a country breaches that Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement, they are breaching their most fundamental obligations to the world to account for and declare all the nuclear material and activities in their country. Now, this investigation, according to the IAEA, has been going on for over a year, clearly related to the nuclear archive that we learned about in 2018 that Israel apparently took out of Iran. This is an archive of Iran's past nuclear weapons activities. They hid it from the world during the negotiations over the Iran nuclear deal. They hid it after those negotiations were completed. They still won't own up to it today, even though we now know about it. And apparently they're still concealing nuclear material, activities, and sites related to their past activities. Why is this important? It's important because the Iran nuclear deal was premised on Iran being honest with the world, telling the IAEA everything it had done, and then being able to take a step into sanctions relief and implicit endorsement of a civil nuclear infrastructure inside of Iran under the auspices of the IAEA. What we're learning is the entire deal was built on lies and deceit. And so when we see now today, after a year of violent activity on behalf of the regime, attacks in the Gulf, attacks in Saudi Arabia, attacks against U.S. forces killing Americans in Iraq. On top of that, continued enrichment of uranium threatening the world with its nuclear infrastructure. And now we know lying and concealing all the past activities on nuclear weapons, all the while continuing to have an organization where the founder of Iran's nuclear weapons program is the chairman, and people who worked on that nuclear weapons program are still employed. When you put the pieces together, you see a puzzle, which is a very dangerous regime, the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, that has pledged the destruction of Israel, pledged the destruction of America, continuing to hold the aspirations and indeed the capabilities to acquire nuclear weapons in the future to threaten us all. We can never let that happen. And so now we have to assess, what do we do from here? The president's maximum pressure campaign has been incredibly successful and historic. One of the greatest decisions of modern times was the president's decision to leave the Iran nuclear deal and reimpose American sanctions on Iran. And so going forward, we need to ensure that that maximum pressure is maintained. Iran is losing money by the day. We need to make sure that their oil revenues remain close to zero, find new ways to impose more pressure, including designating the financial sector of Iran. But we also need to reimpose all of the sanctions and restrictions on Iran that we had prior to the Iran nuclear deal. That has to be done by snapback. is what it's called, the snapback of UN Security Council Resolution 2231 that would reimpose all of the different restrictions and sanctions on Iran that we had in place prior to the nuclear deal. Right now, if snapback does not occur, Iran will start reaping the sunset provisions of the nuclear deal as prescribed in the Security Council resolution. How do they do that? Well, number one, in October, the arms embargo on Iran will lift. That means that Russia and China will be able to freely sell advanced weapons, fighters, tanks, naval platforms, and more to Iran. We cannot let that happen. A couple years later, they get to support their missile program too, to make sure they have better missiles to target not just Europe, but even America. We need to stop this. We can do this. The United States is an original participant in the JCPOA, and because of the way the resolution in the Security Council was drafted, America has the right to demand the snapback of all prior sanctions and restrictions at any time if Iran is in violation of its own nuclear commitments and obligations. The IAEA is telling us they are. And so, in the weeks and months ahead, we're going to have a big battle royale at the UN Security Council, but it's going to be the most important battle we've had there in a long time. We need to win that diplomatic fight. We need to reimpose the UN sanctions and restrictions on Iran. Keep the arms embargo in place indefinitely. Keep all of the restrictions on Iran's missiles in place. Reimpose all the restrictions on their nuclear program. Demand they halt all enrichment. And if we can maintain the economic pressure and add this important political pressure, then Iran, which is hobbling along really on its last legs economically, will have no other choice than to negotiate on President Trump's terms, on Secretary Pompeo's 12 points. If they choose not to, they risk their own collapse. Let's together continue to work and support efforts to reimpose maximum pressure on Iran, add pressure where we can, and stop this terror-sponsoring regime that pledges another Holocaust from ever acquiring the world's most deadly weapons. Thank you for all that you do, and I look forward to being with you in person just as soon as we can.
Now we'll take a break and resume at 7:30 Eastern for an event that you do not want to miss, with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Ambassador Nikki Haley, Ambassador Ron Dermer, Pastor Hagee, and Ambassador David Friedman. We will celebrate the vital and vibrant relationship between the United States and Israel and the importance of standing with the Jewish state for the benefit of both of our countries. The work that we do as Christians United for Israel is more important than ever and more effective than ever. And you'll see why during our session at 7:30 Eastern. Join us on Facebook, YouTube, or the CUFI webpage, www.cufi.org. We'll see you then, and God bless.